AI Limit is yet another Soulslike from an unknown developer set in a post-apocalyptic world. Now, I'm sure plenty of you are tired of hearing that line and I won't blame you for leaving after hearing that. But if you are here, chances are you look at Soulslikes the way fat kids with an unhealthy obsession with pastries look at birthday cake. You know it's not good for you, but you indulge anyway. And yeah, it looks pretty, but it doesn't even taste nice most of the time. Look, I'm not gonna lie and tell you this cake was amazing, but it's a lot better than some of the other cakes on the shelf. That is, if you're not looking at the premium shelf where all the From Software cakes sit. Instead, AI Limit is more like that chocolate cake from Matilda. It may not look like much, but damn if it isn't tasty. AI Limit starts off like most Souls games, with the character waking up suddenly and in some rundown ruin without any context as to how they got there. I have no idea why almost all Souls games begin this way. You know, when you copy someone's homework, you're meant to change a few things. Anyway, further up the route, there's a conveniently placed weapon just before we face our first enemy. But here comes the interesting part. Upon receiving our rusty longsword, we are introduced to a mechanic called Sync Rate. This is AI Limit's showpiece, and I'm only just now realizing how much I hate that name. It sounds like something an AI just shut out. Sync Rate is, for the most part, a momentum bar. The way it works is, whenever you land a successful attack, you gain momentum. Whenever you get hit, you lose momentum. Whenever your momentum sits anywhere between 0 and 50%, your weapon deals less damage. And when it's between 50 and 80%, your weapon deals normal damage. By this logic, I'm sure you figured now that when you're above 80%, you deal increased damage. Inversely, if you drop to 0, you'll be staggered and rendered immobile for a few seconds. Pretty straightforward, right? But here's where it gets even more interesting. Each weapon has a unique weapon skill which is capable of dealing massive damage. And yep, you guessed it, that's gonna cost you momentum to use. So much as 20 to 30% at a time. And so begins the balancing act that is keeping your sync rate above the 50% threshold. Furthermore, there are two other ways to spend your momentum. The first being spells, ranging from a powerful railgun blast to a giant electric hammer smash. These add an extra bit of flair to your combat ability and also receives the bonus damage while above 80% sync rate. I imagine there'll be plenty of these to collect in the full game, but you can only equip one at a time. On the plus side, they can be switched out at any point while out on the field. The other way you can spend momentum is through frame abilities. There's a total of 4 of these to collect throughout the whole game, each catering to different playstyles. The first being a parry option for those seeking a high risk, high reward playstyle. A shield option, this was my go-to as I've always favoured a sword and shield combo in any Souls game. Thirdly, a hyper dash. This allows you to zip in and out of combat, encouraging poke and run tactics. No doubt a great option for the flashy dex balls. And finally, a kind of leech ability that doesn't cost momentum, instead steals a percentage of your health to activate. Once activated, it applies a damage buff to your weapon and creates a sort of blood slash effect with each attack, dealing bonus damage and increased momentum gain. I stayed well clear of this one as it's clearly reserved for those confident in their combat ability, and I'll get to that in a bit. When all 3 elements combine, that is weapon skills, spells and frame abilities, it creates a rather unique loop. One that isn't reliant on prep work, but instead rewards you for mastering the balance of the combat system. Keeping your momentum topped up while making full use of all your abilities becomes a difficult balancing act. But after a bit of practice, you'll soon be pulling off some crazy combat maneuvers. Now it's not all swings and roundabouts, and I don't want to bash this game too hard, considering it is a rather small development team. So small in fact that I can't really find any information on Sense Games, and I believe this is their first game. With that said, let's get into some pros and cons. First of all, I'm sure you've noticed by now, but the art direction for this game is a mix of kinda 2D cel shaded and 3D flat models. It's a bit jarring when your character stands next to some of the sewer dwellers, and makes your character look like they're from a completely different game. I feel the same way about the environment. It all looks incredibly flat and monotone. Granted, we only get to see the sewer level in this demo, but judging from what I've seen, I believe the rest of the game will be just as bland in terms of environmental design. Look, that came out a bit harsher than intended, but I think the devs are smart to prioritize the look of important characters and bosses over spending all that time and resources in making the environment look prettier. Combat. Now, as much as I enjoyed the combat, I feel it lacks a certain grittiness to it. It's a bit hard to explain, but combat feels a tad soft, for lack of a better word. There's a feeling of lightness when your weapon makes contact, much like a fast-paced hack and slash from the early 2000s. After playing Soulslikes for years now, it's immediately apparent the second you fight your first enemy. This leads me well into my next point, the run button. Having played Souls games for so long, I've grown quite accustomed to having the run button the same as the dodge button. Hold B to run and tap B to dodge. In this game, they decided to split these two actions, making A to run and B to dodge. On paper it might not sound like much, but in practice, it throws years of muscle memory out the window. There were many times when I was left holding the dodge button expecting to run. It's not a huge train smash, but in my 4 hours or so with the game, it's not something I ever got used to. Also, props to the devs for allowing you to customize the button layout. Unfortunately, it doesn't solve this issue. If I were to offer the developers one single piece of advice, it would be to have an option where I could make run and dodge a single button. AI Limit is not here to push the needle forward for the genre. Instead, it feels like a game that's heavily inspired by the ones that came before it. Specifically, older FromSoft titles like Dark Souls 1 and 2 and also Bloodborne. The Dark Souls influence comes in the form of its level layout. Now, I'm not saying you should expect Dark Souls 1 level design, but there was this uncanny feeling like I was playing an older FromSoft title. From the many secret pathways with hidden rewards to its oddly placed mini-bosses, and also its weird use of scale and negative space, its level design feels very old school in a way. The Bloodborne influence obviously coming from the fast-paced nature of the combat system, albeit with some added flair and ability options. Plus, doesn't this boss scream we have Lady Maria at home? By the end of the demo, I was genuinely surprised that I had not heard or seen this game before. Well, to be fair, with a name like AI Limit, it's easy to just roll your eyes and scoff at the sight of it. But the second I played it, I quickly learned that it's actually a pretty competent Souls-like with a well-developed combat system. As it stands, there is currently no set release date. The only thing we have to go on is the 2024 release date, and I have an inkling that it might get pushed to 2025. As for the price, well, we don't have one either. But I don't imagine you'll be paying $70 for this game. If I were the betting type, I'd say you'd be looking at the $25 to $30 mark. And if this game can provide a decent 20-hour experience, I'd say that's well worth it. But hey, if you want to give this one a go, you can make that judgment for yourself. The demo is currently available on Steam and I believe on PS5 as well. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this one. I want to thank you if you made it this far. You know what to do. Leave a like. Also, let me know in the comments what you think of the game, maybe if you're planning on playing it as well. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.